Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Space, a year in review 2018. 2018 has been a year of exploration, successes, development, and so much more. So let's talk about what happened in spaceflight in 2018.
I never want to hold again.
Falcon Heavy is on startup.
Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Status check.
Go Delta.
5, 4, 3.
Ignition.
The first launch of 2018 came with the launch of Zuma on January 8th by a Falcon 9. We don't know what actually happened with this launch because it's so classified that literally we don't even know who this was for. Like, no U.S. agency actually ended up claiming this rocket or this satellite. So yeah, but it was reported to have failed, but there wasn't really any official reporting as whether or not it failed. So who knows? And in crewed spaceflight, commercial crew had the announcement of the crew for the first spaceflights, including the first operational spaceflights on NASA's side. The parts of the rocket for both of the uncrewed flights were also shipped to the Cape this year, with flights beginning in January of 2019 with the SpaceX demonstration mission 1. Also in crewed spaceflight, Soyuz MS-10 suffered a huge failure after the vehicle began disintegrating during launch. Luckily, the abort system aboard Soyuz is amazing and was able to get the crew out safely. So yeah, we did an entire video that you can check out. It's going to be up here or up there. Yeah, I'll leave a little pin up at the top for it. But in US spaceflight, Virgin Galactic launched the first crew to reach space since the retirement of the space shuttle in 2011. And India this year announced that they had plans for a crewed launch in 2022. So congrats to the spaceflight team of Roscosmos, of NASA, Virgin, of India for a pretty great year in crewed spaceflight. Staying with crew, let's talk about who actually went to space this year. Aboard Soyuz MS-08 was Oleg Artemyev of Roscosmos, Andrew Fruitel, and Richard Arnold of NASA. Aboard Soyuz MS-09 was Sergei Provenyankev of Roscosmos, Alexander Gers of the European Space Agency, and Serena M. Anon Chancellor of NASA. And then the ill-fated flight of Soyuz MS-10 carried Alexei Overenchin of Roscosmos and Nick Hague of NASA. And finally, Soyuz bounced back with its final launch in December of the Soyuz MS-11 with Oleg Kononenko of Roscosmos, David St. Jacques of Canada, and Anne McLean of NASA. And finally, the last crew to reach space this year was the Starship 2 crew for Virgin Galactic. They carried Mark Stunkey and Frederick Struckhow into space. So congrats to those who went to space this year. But let's talk about solar exploration now, because this has been a year of launches and of the beginnings of new discoveries for solar exploration. First off, the launch of TESS happened on April 18th by a Falcon 9. TESS was meant to look at large portions of the sky in hopes of finding new exoplanets, and they released the first set of pictures earlier this year. Then InSight launched on May 5th by an Atlas V, and that was the first interplanetary launch to happen from Vandenberg, and that landed on Mars on November 26th. After that, Hayabusa 2 arrived at Ryugu on June 17th and has deployed 3 rovers between late September and early October, with another rover being deployed next year and also retrieving samples from Ryugu next year. Then in August, Parker Solar Probe launched aboard a Delta IV Heavy. That happened on August 12th and Parker Solar Probe has achieved its first Venus flyby on October 3rd and its first perihelion on November 5th. And down in French Guiana, BD Colombo launched towards Mercury on October 20th by an Ariane 5 and will arrive at Mercury on December 5th, 2025, so we still got a couple of years before BD Colombo can get there. And finally, OSIRIS-REx arrived at the asteroid Bennu earlier this month with its orbital insertion later today, and it was launched on September 8th of 2016 by an Atlas V. And Chang'e 4 also launched and has reached its final orbit before its landing. Chang'e 4 is scheduled for its landing either on January 2nd or 3rd. China is being China and not really telling us. But Chang'e 4 was launched on December 7th. And then Voyager 2 reached interstellar space in December, being only the second object to ever reach interstellar space, along with Voyager 1. We also had a couple of firsts in 2018. The first that we had was the Falcon Heavy launch, and that's honestly still hard to believe that we've actually had the Falcon Heavy launch, and I was at that launch, so it's still hard to believe that we've seen two boosters come back and land simultaneously, and seen a Tesla in space, mind blown. Rocket Labs also had its first successful launch this year with still testing. They also had two other launches, but more on that later. And the Chinese company Land Space also launched their Zhaoqiu 1 launch. However, that failed, but again, more on that later on. 2018 was also filled with a bunch of goodbyes of both rockets and people significant in space alike. The first rocket one of the rockets we said goodbye to was the Delta II, a staple of U.S. spaceflight since the 1980s. His final launch was the ICESat-2 from Vandenberg. We also said goodbye to the Delta IV Medium Plus 5-2 with the launch of NROL-47. In Japan, we said goodbye to the SS-520 with the launch of the Tricom 1R. Down in French Guiana, we said goodbye to the Ariane 5 ES version with the launch of the Galileo FOC 19 through 22 satellites. And we said goodbye to Falcon 9 Block 3 and 4 with the final non-Block 5 launch being CRS-15. Also, this year, the Google Lunar X Prize expired after no one claimed it. However, the companies that were competing in the Google Lunar X Prize are still going to be continuing with launches scheduled for February of one of the teams. So, but again, more on that later. And we said goodbye to some really important people in spaceflight. First off, we said goodbye to Alan Bean of Apollo 12 and Skylab 3. He was one of the two moonwalkers that we lost this year, with the other being John Young, who flew Gemini 3, Gemini 10, Apollo 10, Apollo 16, STS-1, and STS-9. We also said goodbye to Don Peterson, who flew STS-6. And we said goodbye to Betty Grissom, who is the wife of Gus Grissom, the astronaut who flew the first crewed Gemini flight and the second U.S. space flight, and was on the ill-fated Apollo 1 launch crew. And in astronomy, we said goodbye to Stephen Hawking, who passed away earlier this year. But let's move on to milestones. Ariane Space had two big milestones, with Ariane 5 hitting 100 launches total for its entire history. And Ariane Space had 11 launches over the course of 2018. SpaceX had a couple of big moments with CRS-16 and GovSat. Their boosters both performed water landings, one intentional, one not so much. But both landed semi-successfully in the water, I guess you could count, even though GovSat was supposed to blow itself up. And yeah. SpaceX also reused a booster 3 times this year. And it was also reused 3 times in 1 year. So the first time they'd reused it 3 times. And yeah. They also launched Falcon Heavy and the Block 5 for the first time. And I've almost finished up prep for the crewed space flights. SpaceX finished the year with 21 launches total. ULA has moved closer to crew flights with obviously the shipping of the rocket parts for the uncrewed Boeing test flight. That launch is scheduled for, I believe, April. They said goodbye to Delta II and Delta IV Medium plus 5.2, and they had a total of 8 flights in 2018. ULA also selected Blue Origin to supply the engines for their Vulcan rocket, which takes us into Blue Origin. They conducted 2 flights of New Shepard this year. One of those was a high-altitude abort test. They also received Air Force funding alongside ULA and Northrop Grumman. They said that they'll be using this funding to build a launch complex out at Vandenberg. And Northrop Grumman and Orbital ATK. Orbital ATK was bought out by Northrop Grumman this year, and they had 2 Cygnus/Antares flights this year, so congrats to them. And Astra Space, we've been mistakenly calling them Astra Aerospace. I don't know why, but for some reason in my head I've always thought that it was just Astra Aerospace, but it's Astra Space. But Astra Space did something, we don't know what, because they have claimed the most secretive space program award that Let's Talk Space is giving out. So yeah. And down in New Zealand, Rocket Labs announced a new Wallops launch pad. They also had their first successful flights, and they had back-to-back launches in December and in November and December. So congrats to Rocket Labs on their 3 flights. Over in Russia, Roscosmos suffered 2 setbacks on Soyuz after the MS-09 incident with the hole in the orbital module and the MS-10 failure. Roscosmos also began construction of an Angara launch pad at Vostochny, and they had a total of 17 space flights in 2018, not including the 3 flights from French Guiana that were conducted by Arianespace. And over in China, they unveiled a new spacecraft for crewed flights. Also, Tiangong 1 re-entered, with Tiangong 2 not far behind, as it is expected to re-enter by June of next year. They also launched the first attempt to land on the far side of the moon, as we talked about earlier, and they had a total of 38 flights in 2018. ISRO announced crewed plans, as we said earlier, and they had a total of 6 flights in 2018. And at NASA, they had a new administrator who was sworn in May, after having an acting administrator since January of 2017, after NASA Administrator Charles Bolden stepped down. They also secured funding for a second mobile launcher and launched the InSight and Parker Solar Probe, as well as tests. And ESA shipped the first Orion service module to Cape Canaveral for their launch of the Orion spacecraft. And we got closer to the launch of SLS, and by closer to the launch of SLS, I mean we got closer to finding out what the actual date will be, as SLS was delayed to June of 2020. James Webb was also delayed after it was discovered that parts of the spacecraft were literally falling off as they were doing vacuum testing. It is now expected to launch in March of 2021. And over in Russia, they had the delay of the Nayuka module. It is now scheduled to launch in 2019 in November, but it's more likely to launch in 2020. Now, let's go over the launch statistics for 2018. In total, we had 114 launches worldwide, with 111 successes and 2 failures, with 1 partial success. Coming in at the bottom of the list was Japan with 6 launches, but all of which were successes. Coming in at number 5 was India with 7 launches and 7 successes. However, one of their satellites, the motor failed to fire when they were doing a periapsis raise, so yeah. They had 7 successful launches though. Over in Europe, they had 8 launches with 7 successes, 0 failures, and 1 partial success. That partial success was the launch of an Ariane 5 carrying SES-14 and Al-Yaha 3. That happened on January 25th and failed due to a computer issue where the rocket basically went into the wrong inclination. But both satellites were able to correct, but did lose some of their lifespan. Coming in at number 3 was Russia with 19 launches, or with 20 launches, 19 successes, and 1 failure. The failure being the Soyuz MS-10 that failed. Soyuz MS-10 that failed on October 11th. And our number 1 launch group was China with 39 launches in total, 38 successes, and 1 failure. That 1 failure was the Zykel-1 maiden flight. This failed due to a third stage issue that launched on October 27th. And our number 2 went to the US with 34 launches and 34 successes, though with Zuma being a possible failure, we really don't know. So yeah, those were our launch statistics, but those were the total launches over the course of 2018. Cape Canaveral was the most used launch site with 17 launches, and Wei Chang was the least used with 0 launches. Wei Chang is where they launched the maiden flight of the Long March 5, I believe. And our final launch of 2018 was the Ho Yang, which was launched on December 29th by a Long March 2D. So yeah, that was 2018 in a nutshell. Looking forward, we have a bunch of events that will happen in 2019. Starting off, New Horizons will fly by Ultima Thule on January 1st. Then on either January 2nd or 3rd, the Chang 4 landing will occur. And the first scheduled launch of 2019 is right now the Delta 4 with NROL 31 or 37. That was scheduled to be the last launch of this year, launching yesterday, but it was delayed to January 6th. So hopefully we can actually get this vehicle off the ground. It has been sitting on the ground for way too long and had way too many attempts. We also see the first commercial attempt to land on the moon with Space IL, scheduled for a launch aboard a Falcon 9 on February 13th. We will also likely see the crewed test flights of the SpaceX and Boeing capsules, so there's that to look forward to. SpaceX will also be conducting Grasshopper tests of their Starship in 2019. Blue Origin is also expected to have their first crewed launches in 2019. Hayabusa 2 will depart from Ryugu after collecting a sample in December of 2019. And we have a bunch of new rockets that could fly in 2019. Those include Launcher 1, Vector R, Kaijo 11, Hyperbola 1, Blue Star Vega C, SSLV, and Firefly Alpha. And that's going to about do it for spaceflight. But before we go, let's talk about what Let's Talk Space is going to be doing in 2019. With discussion videos, I want to get back on track and get to at least once a month, and hopefully by the end of the year back to once every 2 weeks, or actually hitting that goal, because we never actually have hit that goal. So yeah, discussion videos are hopefully going to get back on track in 2019. Hopefully. Let's Talk Space News. Besides some minor changes, right now Let's Talk Space News is kind of where I want it to be. But hopefully by the end of 2019, I really want to move Let's Talk Space to more or less a live stream where I do the news live on YouTube and it just gets uploaded afterwards. To do that, I need to actually look into live streaming software and learning how to do that. But that's another part of the plan for 2019. I want to get into live streaming rocket launches and major events for spaceflight. So yeah. And our big announcement for 2019 is we want to start what I'm calling Let's Talk Space Gaming, where we play games like Kerbal or Simple Rockets or the Buzz Aldrin game, something that has to do with spaceflight in some way. That'll probably start in spring. The one thing is with that, I really want to do it almost like a TV show where it's like a 12 episode season, and by the time episode 1 is uploaded, episode 12 is done and just waiting to be uploaded as well. So it would be a weekly thing, probably on Wednesdays is what I'm thinking. So yeah. And finally, the my last goal for 2019 is to get better at commenting back with you guys, because you guys are honestly really great, and I'm a terrible person for not commenting back at you. But like, the reason why is I'm a extreme introvert, and I'm making excuses right now, but I really do want to get better at commenting back, because you guys are really awesome. Like, I've been reviewing the old footage from like August, and I don't know how you guys started watching and liking me, because I was so monotone back then. We've gotten a bit better as we've gone through, but it still isn't great. But we're going to keep improving. I want to really get better at commenting back with you guys. Like, that is my main goal for 2019. Like, if nothing else, if none of the other stuff happens in 2019, commenting is the one that I really do want to get better, because there are some of you that literally comment on like every episode, and I read those, and like, you guys are just so great. Like, honestly, this show would be nothing without you guys. So yeah. But thank you guys so much for an amazing year, and here is to 2019.